It was 2:38 p.m. on a Tuesday when someone knocked on my office door. I was on a work call, headset on, staring at a shared screen full of tickets and timelines. The kind of day that feels predictable. My calendar had 3 meetings left. My coffee was already cold. The knock came again, not loud, just steady. I muted myself without thinking and turned in my chair. Rosa, our cleaner, stood in the hallway. She didn't step into the room. She just held the door frame lightly with one hand, like she needed it to stay upright. In her other hand was a thin plastic grocery bag, the kind that stretches translucent when it's packed too tight. Her eyes met mine and then dropped to the bag. "Mr. Carter," she said, quiet enough that I leaned forward. "I need to show you something." I stayed seated for a second, looking at her face, trying to place what was different. Rosa was usually calm, almost invisible in the best way. She moved through the house with soft footsteps and a routine that never changed. Today, her hands were shaking. I pulled my headset off and stepped into the hallway. I closed the door behind me, not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't want my work call hearing the way my breathing sounded. Rosa held the bag out like it weighed too much. "I found it under the bed," she said, "on your wife's side." I didn't answer right away. I just took the bag, careful, like it might spill. She nodded toward it. "Please look." I opened it. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. The bag was filled with torn gold foil wrappers. Dozens. Some crumpled into tight balls, some flattened like someone had tried to hide them quickly. The brand name was visible on a few of them, bright against the foil. It felt wrong to be staring at something that personal in the middle of my hallway. I reached in, pulled one out between my fingers and turned it over. Empty. Opened. I looked back at Rosa. My mouth was dry. "How many?" I asked. She swallowed. I counted. 43. The number didn't land, it just hovered, like my brain refused to attach meaning to it. My wife, Paige, and I had been married 8 years. We had 2 kids. We hadn't used condoms in years. Not since before our second child was born. I'd had a vasectomy 5 years ago. It was the kind of detail that was boring and final, something you never think about again because it's handled. And yet there I was holding a grocery bag full of proof that someone in our bedroom had been thinking about it a lot. Rosa shifted her weight, like she wanted to back away. "There's more," she said. I kept holding the bag, but my fingers felt numb, like the plastic was slipping even though I was gripping it hard. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt. It looked like it had been stuffed in somewhere and forgotten. The paper was thin, the corners curled. She smoothed it with her palm and handed it to me. A hotel. 2 nights. Room number printed in the middle. The date was from a few weeks earlier. The same weekend, Paige had told me she was at a regional work conference in Columbus. That weekend, I had taken the kids to soccer on Saturday morning. I made grilled cheese for lunch. I did laundry because I told myself it was being supportive. Paige had called me that night, cheerful but tired. "Long day," she said. "I'm going to shower and pass out." I remembered the sound of a TV in the background. I remembered believing her. I remembered putting the phone down and feeling like we were still on the same team, just tired. Now I read the receipt again, slowly, as if the ink might change. Rosa kept her eyes on the floor. "I found it in a jacket pocket," she said, "in her closet. I was checking for tags before I set aside dry cleaning." I looked up at her. She looked like she regretted being honest, like she'd been carrying a weight and needed to hand it off before it crushed her. "You didn't have to bring this to me," I said. The words came out flat. "I know," she whispered. "But you've always been kind. I couldn't leave it." I nodded once. That was all I could manage. A nod that didn't mean acceptance or forgiveness, just acknowledgement that something had changed. Rosa stepped back. "If you want, I can go," she said. I shook my head slowly. "No, it's fine. You can finish up." She hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the kitchen, her steps quiet again, like she was trying not to exist. I stayed in the hallway with the bag in one hand and the receipt in the other. The house was still. I could hear the faint whir of the vacuum from another room, the distant click of a cabinet closing. Normal sounds, the kind you stop noticing when your life is steady. I stared at the date on the receipt one more time, and then I did something that surprised me. I didn't call Paige. I didn't text her. I didn't sit down. I walked back into my office, closed the door, and set everything on my desk carefully, like I was laying out parts for a project. Bag on the left, receipt on the right. Then I opened my laptop and logged into our family cell plan. And I started reading the records like they were someone else's life. I didn't even know what I was looking for yet. I just knew I was going to look. I scrolled through the call log first. Not the messages, not the content, just the boring metadata. Dates, times, durations. The kind of information that feels harmless until you're looking for something you never wanted to find. The weekend on the receipt was still in my head, so I started there. Friday morning, the day Paige said she was leaving early for her conference. A text to a number I didn't recognize, then a call. Short, then another text around lunch, another call mid-afternoon, another late at night. I told myself it could be a coworker, a vendor, someone from her team coordinating travel. I kept saying that in my head like a calming phrase. Then I went back a week. Same number, same rhythm. Mornings, lunch hours, and late at night. Calls that ran 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Texts spaced in ways that didn't look like work logistics. They looked like checking in. They looked like wanting access to someone's day. My throat tightened, but my hands kept moving. I clicked the number and ran it through a reverse lookup site. A name came back. Evan Holt, mid-30s, sales, same healthcare company as Paige. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped blurring. Evan Holt, a coworker, not a stranger, not a random mistake. A person who likely knew our kids' names from Paige's desk photos. A person who probably shook my hand once at a holiday party while pretending he didn't know the layout of our bedroom. I sat very still, and in the quiet of my office I could hear the refrigerator cycle on downstairs. A soft hum, then off again. I opened Paige's work calendar next. Years ago, when the kids were little and life was chaotic, we'd synced calendars to the same Google account. It was supposed to help. If she had a late meeting, I'd know I was on dinner duty. If I had an on-site day, she'd know pickup was on her. It was practical, boring, normal. Now it felt like a window someone had left open. I searched the dates from the hotel receipt. The event on her calendar said something like, Regional Summit, Columbus, Friday through Sunday. I opened a new tab and searched it, then searched again with the year. Then with her company name, nothing. No agenda page, no registration link, no social posts, no speaker list. Nothing that usually exists for anything that calls itself a summit. I sat back and let the quiet settle, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because my brain needed a second to catch up. It wasn't that I thought every conference had a glossy website, some don't. But a regional summit in a major city for a healthcare marketing team, something would exist, a flyer, a LinkedIn post, anything. I went to our credit card portal next. We keep separate cards. That's never been a problem between us. We split bills, we share expenses, we don't police each other's spending, but we're both authorized on each other's accounts for emergencies. That had always felt like trust. I opened Paige's statement and filtered by the same weekend. The hotel charge was there, matching the receipt. Then dinner, not in Columbus, a restaurant in our metro area, 20 minutes from our house. Then a bar charge. Then breakfast the next morning. The charges were so ordinary they almost made it worse. Nothing extravagant, no weird cash withdrawals, just a weekend that looked like someone trying to have a normal couple's time, close to home, without being seen. I checked the date again. Then I did something I'm not proud of, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't do it. I opened our location sharing app. Paige and I had turned it on years ago when Emma was a toddler and Paige was commuting downtown. It was about safety. If someone got stranded, we'd know where to find them. We barely looked at it. I pulled up the location history for that weekend. The map zoomed in on our own city, not Columbus, not any airport. A hotel corridor of roads I recognized, near a shopping center we'd been to a dozen times. A place I'd driven past without noticing because it was just part of the landscape. I put my phone face down on the desk. For a moment I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel like I was about to explode. What I felt was something colder. A kind of quiet disorientation, like realizing you've been walking with a limp for months and you only notice it when you finally stop. Downstairs I heard Rosa moving around, a drawer opening, soft footsteps. The house was being cleaned the way it always was on Tuesdays, and it made me feel strangely trapped in two realities at once, one normal, one new. I looked at the bag on my desk again. 43 wrappers, gold foil, hidden behind the bedskirt on Paige's side. There was no plausible explanation that made that normal. I could have confronted her that night. It would have been easy. I could have held up the bag like it was a weapon. I could have demanded an explanation and watched her scramble. But something in me refused to do it that way. Not because I wanted to be noble, not because I was trying to win some imaginary moral contest, because I needed to understand the whole shape of it before I let her know I'd seen it. I needed the truth to be solid, not just an accusation, not just a gut feeling. So I started making a file, a folder on my laptop with a plain name, nothing dramatic, just a date. Inside it, I saved screenshots of the call logs, I saved copies of the statements, I exported the location history. I took photos of the receipt and the bag, and I added them too. Then I opened a spreadsheet. I labeled columns like I was building a work project. Date, time, source, location, amount, notes. At first, it felt ridiculous, like I was turning my marriage into data. But after 10 minutes, it didn't feel ridiculous at all. It felt like the only thing keeping me from floating off into some fog of denial, because the more I entered, the clearer the pattern became. Late meeting nights matched bar charges. Team dinner evenings matched two-person restaurant tabs. Work trips lined up with phone calls to Evan that started early and went late. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't picking out random things and making them fit. The pieces were lining up on their own. Around 4:10 p.m., my phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Paige. "Can you grab Noah from aftercare today? I've got a late one." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Yep." And I watched the little blue bubble send. I didn't know where she was right then. I didn't check. Not yet. I closed the spreadsheet and sat there quietly, listening to the faint sounds of Rosa finishing up downstairs. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out something I'd forgotten I owned, a small voice-activated recorder I'd bought 2 years ago for work meetings and never used. I held it in my palm, feeling its weight, and I made a decision that felt less like emotion and more like procedure. Step 1, don't confront. Step 2, confirm. Step 3, move only when the timeline is complete. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and placed the recorder in a spot Paige would never notice. Then I turned it on. The tiny light blinked once, and then I waited. The next morning, Paige left the house the way she always did. Coffee in a travel mug, hair still slightly damp. A quick kiss on the cheek that felt automatic, like muscle memory. She reminded me Noah needed his library book. She asked if I could run the dishwasher before bed. Normal tasks, normal tone. I watched her back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. When the garage door closed, the house settled into that quiet weekday stillness, the kind that used to feel peaceful. I waited a full minute anyway, just standing in the kitchen with my phone in my hand, listening for any reason to stop myself. Then I called my manager. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm going to take a personal day, family thing." He didn't press. He just said, "Take care of what you need." I hung up and stood there a moment longer, looking at the counter where the kids' lunch boxes sat drying. Then I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't have some big plan. I wasn't following her. I wasn't trying to catch anyone in the act. I just needed one piece of outside confirmation, something that didn't rely on my interpretation of logs and maps. The hotel from the receipt was on the edge of a commercial strip near a highway exit I'd taken 100 times without noticing what was around it. Beige building, clean parking lot, the usual quiet efficiency of a place built for people who don't want to be remembered. I walked into the lobby. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and a faint, sweet scent from one of those plug-in fresheners. A TV was on behind the front desk with the volume low. A couple of brochures sat fanned out on a rack. The clerk looked up and smiled in a practiced way. "Can I help you?" I kept my expression neutral. "Yeah, I'm trying to confirm a stay for a card statement. My wife was here a few weeks ago. I'm matching charges. He nodded like he'd heard it before. Name? I gave it to him. Paige Carter, he typed. His face didn't change. That, more than anything, made my stomach tighten, because it meant my question wasn't surprising. After a moment he said, I see it. 2 nights. I held the receipt up, not close to his face, just enough that he could see I wasn't guessing. Room number should be on there. Does that match what you have? He leaned forward slightly, glanced, and nodded. Matches. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I asked the next question the way I'd ask about a warranty. Was it just her on the reservation? His hands paused on the keyboard. He looked up and then down again. I can't really discuss guest information, he said, not unkindly. I nodded like I understood. Then I said, I'm not asking for details. I'm just trying to understand why the bill is what it is. It matters if it was 1 guest or 2. He hesitated. Not long. Just long enough. Then he said quietly, It was 2. The word landed with a dull heaviness. I didn't react. I didn't want him to remember me as emotional. I just nodded once, like I'd received a shipping confirmation. Okay, I said. Thank you. He kept his voice low. They checked in together. I didn't ask for a description. I didn't ask for a name. I didn't ask anything that would drag it into spectacle. I already had the name I needed. Evan Holt. The call logs had done that work. I walked back out to my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. In the 3rd-floor windows, the curtains were all drawn the same. Nothing to see, nothing to prove with my eyes. It wasn't anger I felt in that moment. It was the clean, unpleasant finality of a stamped document. The story was real, not a suspicion, not a fear, real. My phone buzzed again while I sat there. A message from Paige. Running behind, might be home after 7. Can you handle dinner? I stared at the screen and noticed something small. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I typed back, sure. Then I put the phone down and sat there for another minute, letting the calm arrive. Not peace, just control. On the drive back, I stopped at a coffee shop and opened my laptop. I added a new line to the spreadsheet. Hotel confirmation, 2 guests, date and time. Notes. Clerk confirmed verbally. I saved it, closed the folder, and went home to pick up the kids like nothing had changed. That evening moved in its usual pattern. Homework at the kitchen table. Noah making a big deal out of cutting his chicken the right way. Emma showing me a worksheet and asking if I thought her handwriting looked too babyish. I answered the way I always did. I laughed at the right moments. I cleaned up. I got them into pajamas. I read 2 chapters of a book and turned out the lights. Paige came home after 7:30. She walked in with that tired, friendly smile she used when she wanted things to feel normal. She kissed the top of Noah's head. She told Emma she looked tall. She asked me if the dishwasher ran. I said yes. She ate leftovers, standing at the counter, and told me about her late meeting, the kind of vague story you can say without details because most people won't ask for more. Her phone lit up once. She glanced at it and flipped it over. Then she looked at me. You okay? You seem quiet. Just tired, I said. Same, she replied and yawned. Later, after she fell asleep, I waited until her breathing smoothed out. I didn't rush. I didn't want adrenaline to make me sloppy. I slipped into the bedroom, moved quietly around the nightstand, and retrieved the recorder. Back in my office, I plugged it into my laptop. A small file appeared on the screen. Hours of audio. I stared at the timeline bar and felt a strange detachment, like I was reviewing a system log. I put on headphones and pressed play. At first it was nothing but soft house sounds. A drawer opening, water running, Paige humming without thinking. A short phone call with someone she called Mom. I scrolled forward in small jumps, listening for any shift in tone. Then, near the middle of the recording, I heard her phone ring. There was a pause, the small shuffle of sheets, and then her voice, lower than it had been all day. Hey, she said. A man's voice came through the speaker, close and familiar in a way that made my stomach go tight again. Hey, he said. You alone? I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sat there in the dark, listening, with my hand resting flat on the desk as if I needed the weight of it to stay steady. And I let the recording continue. The man's voice on the recording wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had that relaxed confidence people use when they think they're safe. Paige sounded different, too. Not panicked, not careful, just soft, like she'd been waiting. "Yeah," she said. "I'm alone." "Good," he replied. "I've been thinking about you all day." There was a small pause, fabric shifting, the quiet click of her phone being set down on the nightstand. "Don't," she said. But she didn't sound like she meant stop. She sounded like she meant keep going, just not out loud. He laughed once, low. "When can I see you again?" "I don't know," Paige said. "Mark's working from home more, he's around." "So lunch," he said. "I can get us a room." Paige made a sound that would have meant nothing to me a month ago. Now it felt like a door closing. "You're ridiculous," she said. "Only with you," he answered. I listened for a few more minutes, long enough to hear the shape of it. Not a mistake, not a one-time slip. It sounded practiced, comfortable, like two people who'd done this enough times to stop being nervous. Then Paige said his name. "Evan," she whispered, like it tasted familiar. I paused the audio and took my headphones off. The room was silent except for my computer fan. I sat there with my hands on the desk, palms down, and stared at the dark window. I could see my own reflection faintly. It didn't look like me. It looked like a person trying to act normal in a situation that had stopped being normal. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even feel the urge. What I felt was the same thing I feel when a system breaks at work and the cause becomes obvious. Not relief exactly, more like clarity. You stop guessing. You stop negotiating with theories. You move. I opened the spreadsheet again. I added a new section labeled Audio. Date, timestamp, key phrases, confirmation of identity. I typed with 2 fingers at first, slower than usual, because my hands felt heavy. Then my speed returned, like muscle memory kicking in. I saved the file. Then I made a second copy in a separate folder and backed it up to a drive I don't use for anything else. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I've learned the hard way that data disappears when you assume it won't. After that, I wrote down rules. Not in some inspirational way. Just simple sentences on a notepad. No confrontation without paperwork. No arguments without a timeline. No decisions while angry. I looked at the last one for a while. It felt almost funny, because I didn't feel angry yet. I felt contained, but I knew myself well enough to plan for the version of me that might show up later. The next day, I kept the house routine steady. Breakfast, school drop-off, work calls, dishes, a load of laundry, a normal Tuesday pretending to exist alongside a second life I was quietly documenting. Paige texted me around noon. "Crazy day. Might grab dinner with the team." I looked at it and waited a full 10 seconds before I replied. "Okay. Kids and I are fine." She heart reacted it. That tiny red icon on my screen almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so small compared to everything underneath it. That evening, while the kids played in the living room, I checked her card statement again. A restaurant charge appeared around 8:15 p.m., 2 miles from her office. Then a bar charge at 10:04 p.m. I checked the call log, a 27-minute call to Evan at 10:11 p.m. I didn't need to imagine where she was. The numbers were doing the talking. By Thursday, I had enough entries that the pattern stopped looking like a pattern and started looking like a schedule. Lunch hour meetups. Late meetings that matched hotel charges. Not always the same hotel, but always the same radius from home. Trips that didn't exist. Calls that started as soon as she left the driveway. I kept my notes plain. No opinions, no emotional language, just facts. Because facts do not argue back. On Friday morning, after Paige left, I drove to an office building downtown and walked into a law firm with my folder in my bag. The lobby was quiet, clean, and too bright. A receptionist asked me to sign in. I wrote my name in neat block letters like I was signing a package delivery. The attorney was a man in his late 40s named Thomas Reed. He didn't waste time with small talk. He shook my hand, offered me water, and sat down across from me at a conference table. "What's going on?" he asked. I placed the folder on the table between us and opened it. Hotel receipt, photos, statements, a printed call log, a short transcript from the audio with timestamps. Thomas flipped through everything slowly, not reacting, just absorbing. When he finished, he set the papers down neatly, like he respected what I'd done, even if he didn't say it. "This is organized," he said. "I build systems for a living," I replied. He nodded once. "Okay, here's what I want you to do next." He held up a finger. "First, keep living normally. Don't tip her off. People do unpredictable things when they think they're about to lose control." Second finger. "Second, keep collecting only what you can legally access. Shared accounts, shared bills, anything in the home. No breaking passwords, no hacking, no installing anything on her phone." I nodded. I didn't need a lecture. I needed boundaries. Third finger. "Third, we file when you're ready. We can talk about custody, the house, support. But the timing matters." I sat back and looked at the folder as if it belonged to someone else. "How does custody usually work?" I asked. He didn't make promises. He spoke like someone who'd said the same sentences to 100 people. "We aim for stability," he said. "Who has the routine? Who does school drop off? Who can keep things consistent? Your documentation helps, especially if it shows she's been absent or dishonest in ways that affect the kids." I thought about Emma's spelling test, Noah's library book, Paige asking me to cover pickups while she built another life a few miles away. "I want the kids to stay in the house," I said. "Their school, their rooms, I want it steady." Thomas nodded. Then we moved carefully. Before I left, he slid a single sheet of paper toward me, a checklist, plain language, steps. It should have felt surreal, like a movie. Instead, it felt like a plan. I drove home, parked in my own driveway, and sat in the car for a minute with the engine off. Inside, the house looked the same as it always did. The porch light still needed a new bulb. A kid's glove sat on the front steps. Nothing outside my windshield suggested my marriage was already over, except the folder on the passenger seat. When I finally went inside, I put the folder in a locked drawer in my office. Then I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, slowly, like I was resetting myself. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Paige. "Can you keep Sunday open? I might have a work thing." I stared at the message, then opened my calendar, and without replying, I wrote 3 words in the Sunday slot. Confirm the timeline. Then I set the phone down and listened to the house breathe. Monday morning started like most Mondays. Lunches packed, shoes hunted down. Emma asking me to fix a ponytail that never sits right the first time. Noah insisting his dinosaur hoodie was the lucky one for spelling. Paige moved through the kitchen with her phone in hand, half present, smiling at something on her screen and then catching herself when she noticed me watching. "You're staring," she said lightly. "Just thinking," I replied. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her travel mug and left. No hesitation, no change in pace. The same woman who could walk out the door and leave a whole second life behind her like it was a tab she'd closed. After the kids were dropped off, I sat in my office and did nothing for a few minutes. Not because I was frozen, but because I was steadying the timing. Thomas had filed the paperwork Friday afternoon. The plan was simple. Paige would be served at work, not at home, not around the kids, not in front of neighbors. Clean, contained, professional. At 10:26 a.m., my phone buzzed. Paige. I let it ring twice before I answered, mostly to make sure my voice would sound normal. "What is this?" she said, not greeting me, not even pretending. Her voice had the thin edge of panic. "What do you mean?" "Don't do that," she snapped. "Some guy just handed me divorce papers in the middle of the office, in front of my team. Mark, what the hell is wrong with you?" I kept my tone even, not soft, not cold, just steady. "I didn't want it handled at home," I said. "The kids don't need to see any of it." There was a short silence. I could hear office noise behind her, muffled voices, someone walking past. "So this is real," she said, quieter now. "You're actually doing this." Yes. For what? She said, and it came out too fast, like she was reaching for the only version of the story where she still had control. Because I've been busy? Because we've been stressed? Because I missed a couple dinners? I didn't take the bait. It's not about dinners, I said. Another silence. Then her voice changed again, sharper. Did someone tell you something? Did Rosa say something? I didn't answer that. Silence is a tool if you use it on purpose. I let it sit long enough that she filled it herself. Oh my God, she said. You went through my stuff. I reviewed our shared accounts, I said, and I confirmed what I needed to confirm. You're spying on me, she said, louder now. This is insane. It's not insane, I said. It's organized. That was when her voice cracked. What did you find? She asked. Smaller, like she already knew. I didn't list everything on the phone. I wasn't going to argue through a cellular connection like it was some messy couple fight. We can talk tonight, I said, after the kids are asleep, in the kitchen. I'm not coming home to be ambushed. It's not an ambush, I said. It's a conversation. You can choose to have it or not. Either way, the filing stands. She exhaled hard, like she was trying to breathe through a tight space. This is humiliating, she said. Do you know what you've done to me? I paused before I answered, mostly to keep the focus where it belonged. I know what you've done, I said. We'll talk tonight. I ended the call before it turned into something theatrical. Then I sat still for a moment, listening to the quiet of my office, and I wrote down the evening plan in my notebook. Not because I needed help remembering, but because writing it made it real and controlled. Step 1. Kids' routine stays normal. Step 2. Conversation stays in the kitchen. Step 3. Facts only, no debating. Step 4. If it escalates, I stop. At 2:58 p.m., Paige texted me. We need to talk now. I replied, tonight, after the kids. At 3:12 p.m. she called again. I let it ring. She called twice more. I let those ring too, not to punish her, not to be cruel. Because the timing mattered, and because the version of me that reacts fast is the version that makes mistakes. When I picked up the kids, I didn't change anything. I asked about their days. I listened to Noah's story about a kid who traded crackers for Pokemon cards. I admired Emma's worksheet. I kept my voice calm, the way it always is in the car, because kids can feel a shift before they can explain it. At home, I made dinner. Pasta, the easy kind. We ate at the table. Paige wasn't home yet. She texted once. Running late. I said, okay. She walked in at 7:41 p.m., cheeks flushed, eyes too bright, as if she'd been crying in the car and had tried to fix it before coming inside. She hugged the kids too tightly. Hi, my babies, she said, voice shaky. Emma looked at me like she was checking for instructions. I gave her a small nod, the kind that says everything is fine, keep being 7. Paige ate a few bites, standing at the counter, barely tasting it. She kept glancing toward my office, like she expected me to have built a trap in there. When the kids went upstairs for bedtime, Paige followed them, overly attentive, asking too many questions about teeth brushing and pajamas. It didn't feel like care. It felt like she was trying to anchor herself to something innocent so she wouldn't float away. I did bedtime like I always do. 2 chapters for Emma, 1 for Noah, a glass of water, a final check under the bed for imaginary monsters. At 9:18 p.m., I walked back downstairs. Paige was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her phone face down and her arms crossed tight over her chest. The overhead light made her look pale. Not guilty, not evil, just human and cornered. I didn't sit right away. I filled a glass of water at the sink and took a sip. I kept my movements slow on purpose. Then I sat across from her. She started immediately. How could you do this without talking to me first? She said. After everything we've been through? I looked at her for a moment before I answered. We can talk, I said. But I'm not here to negotiate reality. Her jaw tightened. So you're just done. That's it. You don't care. I care about the kids, I said. And I care about stability. She let out a short laugh that sounded like a crack. Stability. You're throwing our family in the trash over what, a few mistakes? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her energy. I opened the drawer beside me and took out the folder I'd prepared. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. I'm going to show you what I know, I said. You can respond to it or you cannot, but I'm not guessing. She stared at the folder like it was something dirty. What is that? She asked. Timeline, I said. Statements, call logs, hotel receipts. Her face changed on the word receipts, like her body recognized what her mouth was still trying to deny. You went through my purse, she said. No, I replied. Rosa found a receipt in a jacket pocket while cleaning. After that, I reviewed shared records. Her eyes flicked away for half a second, then back. Why are you involving her? She said, angry now. Why are you dragging a cleaner into our marriage? I didn't involve her, I said. She brought me something she found in the house we both live in. She didn't ask for this. Paige swallowed, and for a moment she looked like she might be sick. Mark, she said, and her voice softened like she was stepping into a different strategy. Please, whatever you think you know, I can explain it. I nodded once. You can try. She reached for the folder but didn't open it. Her fingers rested on the edge like it burned. I've been unhappy, she said, for a long time. I didn't respond. I let the silence do what it does. She kept going, filling it. You've been distant. You work all the time. You're calm all the time, like you don't feel anything. I felt alone, even when you were in the room. I listened, not because I agreed, but because I wanted to understand exactly what story she was going to tell herself. When she finished, she looked at me like she expected a reaction. I kept my face neutral. That's not an explanation, I said. That's a justification. Her eyes flashed. So, you're perfect now? No, I said. I'm responsible. She leaned forward. What do you want from me? I tapped the folder lightly with one finger. I want honesty, I said. Simple. Did you have an ongoing relationship with Evan Holt? Her mouth opened, then closed again. A pause. Long enough. She didn't answer. I nodded once, as if that was enough. Okay, I said quietly. Then I'll answer for you with the information I have. I opened the folder myself and turned it so I could see it, not like I was presenting a case to a jury, but like I was reading a report. I didn't read every line. I didn't recite it to punish her. I just named the anchors. October 12th, dinner charge near your office, 2 entrees. That night, a 40-minute call to Evan at 11:07 p.m. Paige's breathing changed, shallow. October 14th through 16th, hotel stay 20 minutes from our house. 2 guests confirmed. That weekend you told me you were in Columbus. She shook her head once, small, like she wanted the words to disappear. And there were condoms hidden under your side of the bed, I said, still calm. We haven't used condoms in years. Her eyes filled. She looked down at the table. You put papers together like I'm a criminal, she whispered. I put facts together, I said, because facts don't shift when you get emotional. Paige's hands trembled. She pressed them flat on the table like she was trying to steady them. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she said. I waited. Then I asked, how did you mean for it to happen? She didn't answer. She just cried, quietly, the way people do when the story collapses and there's nothing left to perform. I let her cry. I didn't comfort her. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because comfort would have been confusing. Comfort would have sounded like hope, and I wasn't offering hope. When her breathing slowed, I spoke again. This is how it's going to work, I said. The kids stay on their routine. They stay in their school. They stay in the house. Paige looked up, eyes red. So you're kicking me out. I'm asking you to live somewhere else while we sort this out, I said. It's temporary, it's clean, it's better for them than watching us circle each other. You can't just decide that, she said, and the anger returned, thinner this time. I can decide what I allow in this house, I said, and I'm not doing chaos. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're cold," she said. I nodded slightly. "I'm controlled." She pushed her chair back and stood, hands shaking again. "I hate you," she said. Not loud, not screaming, just raw. I didn't respond to that, because it wasn't about me being hated. It was about her losing a version of life where she could keep everything. She walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, and into the bedroom. I heard a drawer open, then another, the sound of a suitcase zipper. I stayed at the table. I didn't chase her. I didn't argue in the hallway. I didn't call her names. I sat there with the folder in front of me, the kitchen lights still on, and I listened to the quiet, ordinary sounds of a life reorganizing itself. Then I took out my notebook again and wrote one more line under the steps. Step 5. Let her move without a scene. And I waited. Paige left that night with a small suitcase and her laptop bag. Not everything, just enough to make it real. I heard the front door open, then the soft click of it closing again. A minute later, her car started and backed out of the driveway. The sound faded down the street and the house returned to the kind of quiet you only notice when you have been living with background tension for too long. I stayed at the kitchen table for another 5 minutes. I didn't move because I didn't need to. Nothing about my next steps depended on speed. When I finally stood up, I turned off the downstairs lights, checked the locks, and walked through the living room once. Biscuit lifted his head from his bed, blinked, then settled again. He didn't understand the difference. That helped more than it should have. The next morning, Paige texted me. "Can we please talk? I didn't sleep," I replied. "We can talk through our attorneys. Keep it calm for the kids." A few minutes later, she wrote, "You're really doing this?" I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I'd already answered in the only way that mattered. By the end of the week, she had an apartment lined up downtown. She called it temporary. I didn't correct her. I let the paperwork do that. Thomas filed for temporary orders right away. It's not dramatic. It's administrative. Who stays in the house? Who pays which bills? How parenting time works until the court sets something more permanent. I brought him what he asked for. School calendars, pediatrician contact info, my work schedule, aftercare invoices. A list of who usually does pickup, who schedules appointments, who knows the teachers' names without looking them up. It felt strange, laying out the private mechanics of our family like a diagram, but it also felt honest. Those things were real. They existed regardless of what Paige and I had been pretending. Paige's response came through her lawyer 2 days later. It wasn't an apology, it was a request. She wanted 50-50 custody immediately. Thomas didn't roll his eyes, he didn't get emotional. He just said, "Okay, then we show the court the routine." So we did. We submitted the timeline I'd built, not as a story, not as revenge, but as context. Nights she claimed late meetings that matched bars and hotels. Weekends she claimed travel that matched local charges. Patterns that showed she had been absent in ways that mattered. Not because adultery is the only thing courts care about. It's not. But consistency matters. And lying about where you are, repeatedly, does not help your case when you're asking a judge to trust your judgment with children. 2 weeks later, we had a temporary hearing. It wasn't a courtroom with drama, it was a plain room with a judge, a clerk, and 2 attorneys who spoke in careful sentences. I didn't look at Paige much. I didn't need to. The judge asked straightforward questions. Who handles morning routine? Who does school drop off? Who coordinates medical appointments? Who is home most weekdays? I answered plainly. Paige answered too, sometimes accurately, sometimes with a tone that suggested she was still trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. The judge didn't comment on feelings. He just made a temporary order. The kids would stay primarily with me in the house during the week. Paige would have alternate weekends, plus 1 dinner visit midweek. We'd revisit after a few months, and after we completed mediation, it wasn't a victory, it was structure. In the parking lot afterward, Paige approached me. Her eyes were swollen, but she kept her voice controlled, which I respected. "You made me look like a bad mother," she said. I didn't argue. "I didn't make you anything," I said. "I showed the schedule we already live." She shook her head like she wanted to say more, then stopped herself. "I never wanted to hurt them," she said. I believe you, I replied, because I did. But you still made choices that affected them. She looked down at the pavement and nodded once, small. That was the closest we got to honesty without paperwork. Mediation took place the following month in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and copier toner. A neutral mediator sat at the head of the table and explained rules, as if we were negotiating a contract. In a way, we were. Paige asked for the house. Then she asked for more parenting time. Then she asked for a slower timeline, so we can see if counseling changes anything. Thomas kept his tone even and brought everything back to basics. Stability for the kids, school district, routine, financial reality. Paige's attorney mentioned the affair once, trying to minimize it. Thomas didn't argue about the affair. He argued about facts. The affair didn't pay the mortgage. The school schedule didn't bend for feelings. The kids still needed to wake up and know where their backpack was. Halfway through the day, Paige asked for a break. She stepped into the hallway and made a phone call. When she came back, she didn't sit right away. She stood behind her chair, hands gripping the top like she needed it to stay grounded. "He's not answering," she said quietly. No one asked who. No one needed to. A few minutes later, she sat down, and her requests changed. Smaller, more realistic, less performative. By the end of mediation, we had an agreement that looked like the outcome we were already moving toward. I kept the house. Paige kept her car. We split savings. We split retirement accounts in the standard way. Parenting time stayed close to the temporary order, with room to adjust later if she built consistency again. Thomas said, "This is reasonable," and that was as close to encouragement as he ever got. The divorce was finalized on paper 3 months after Paige moved out. No dramatic courtroom scene, just signatures, filings, and a stamped decree that arrived in a plain envelope. That night, after the kids were asleep, I put the envelope on the kitchen table and opened it. I read the pages slowly. Not because the language was poetic. It wasn't. It was legal and dry and precise. But I wanted to see it all the way through. I wanted the ending to be real, not imagined. When I finished, I stacked the papers neatly, put them back in the envelope, and set it beside my folder of evidence. 2 folders, 2 timelines. One that proved what happened. One that defined what happens next. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood there in the dark for a moment, listening to the house settle. The last piece I needed was not another argument. It was confirmation that the story would hold up when other people touched it. So I kept doing what I'd been doing. I documented. I organized. I stayed boring. Thomas had me turn my timeline into something that could live in court without sounding personal. No adjectives, no commentary, no hurt feelings. Just dates, locations, charges, call durations, and the one hotel confirmation that mattered because it came from someone who had no reason to lie. The audio was handled carefully, not played for drama, not passed around, just logged, time-stamped, and referenced as proof of identity and intent. I hated that it existed. I hated that I had needed it. But once it was there, it became part of the structure. Paige's attorney tried to shift it into a debate about privacy and trust. Thomas kept bringing it back to shared access and lawful records. The judge didn't need speeches. He needed a clean timeline and a stable plan for 2 kids. A month after mediation, we had the final hearing. It didn't feel like a climax. It felt like a closing file. Paige sat at the other table. She looked smaller than she had in the kitchen that night, not physically, just emotionally. Her posture was tight, hands folded, eyes flicking between the judge and her attorney like she was waiting for someone to tell her which version of herself to present. When the judge asked if we agreed to the terms, Thomas said, "Yes." Paige hesitated long enough for the room to notice, then she said, "Yes." That was it. The order was signed. The schedule became official, school nights with me, alternate weekends with Paige, 1 midweek dinner visit, shared decision-making for medical and school, child support based on income. The house in my name, with a buyout timeline that was already set by our agreement. On paper, it was tidy. In real life, it was still a family, learning how to breathe differently. The first weekend the kids went to Paige's apartment, Emma asked me 3 questions in a row while she zipped her backpack. "Do we have to go? Are you coming too? Is Mom mad at me? I knelt down in the hallway and kept my voice steady. No. No. And no. She nodded like she understood, but I could see her trying to store the answers somewhere safe. Noah didn't ask questions. He just carried Biscuit's old tennis ball to the door like it was important to take something familiar with him. When Paige arrived, she didn't come inside. She stood on the porch with her keys in her hand and that same bright, over-controlled expression. "Hi," she said to the kids, too cheerful, like a teacher greeting a class. Emma hugged her quickly. Noah half hugged, half leaned, then looked back at me. "I'll see you Sunday," I said, and kept it simple. Paige's eyes met mine for a second. There was a lot inside that second. Anger, regret, pride, disbelief. I didn't step into it. "Drive safe," I said. She gave a small nod and walked them to the car. I watched the taillights disappear down the street, and then I went back inside and stood in the quiet living room for a moment, letting the silence be what it was. That night, Paige called me. Not about the kids, not about scheduling, about him. I could hear it before she said a word. The way her breathing sounded, like she'd been crying and didn't want me to know. "He won't answer," she said. I didn't ask who. I waited. "I thought," she continued, then stopped. "I thought if I was free, he'd be there." I kept my tone neutral. "You don't need to tell me details," I said. "Is everything okay with the kids?" "Yes," she whispered. "They're fine. Emma's asleep. Noah's watching a movie." "Good," I said. There was another pause, longer this time. "He said he didn't sign up for this," she said, voice tight. "That he thought it was just an escape." I listened without commenting, not because I felt nothing, but because nothing I said would improve the situation. She made a small sound, like she was swallowing something bitter. "He told me not to call him again," she said. I didn't respond right away. I chose my words carefully. "Paige," I said, "we're going to keep our conversations about the kids and logistics. That's the healthiest way through this." She exhaled shakily. "So you're just going to leave me like this?" "I'm going to keep things stable for Emma and Noah," I said. "That's my job now." She didn't argue. She just went quiet, and then she said, "Okay," in a voice that sounded like acceptance and loss at the same time. When the kids came back Sunday evening, they were fine on the surface. Tired, a little restless, full of small stories. Emma told me Paige had a new shower curtain with flowers that looked like fireworks. Noah told me the apartment elevator was slow and he didn't like the hallway smell. Ordinary details. The kinds of details that matter to kids because kids measure safety through the smallest things. After they were in bed, I sat at my desk and opened the folder one last time, not to relive it, to close it. I checked the final order against our agreement. I checked the dates. I checked the account transfers Thomas had outlined. I put everything in a single envelope, labeled it with the year, and filed it where I keep tax documents and warranty papers. Same category, same energy. Then I turned off my monitor and sat in the dark office chair for a minute, listening to the house. Upstairs, one of the kids shifted in their sleep. The sound was soft, familiar. I didn't feel victory. I felt the steady, quiet weight of a decision completed. And for the first time in months, I didn't have anything left to prove. A few weeks after everything became official, the house started to feel like ours again. Not the old version of ours with two adults pretending. A new version, smaller, clearer, built around school mornings, dinner dishes, and bedtime stories. On Tuesdays and Fridays, Rosa still came. We never spoke about what she found. She didn't need thanks beyond what I already gave her, steady pay, respect, and the quiet understanding that her honesty had changed the direction of 3 lives. Sometimes, when she was leaving, she would pause at the door and ask how the kids were doing. I would tell her the truth. "They're okay, getting used to it." She'd nod like she knew exactly what that meant. I kept my routines simple on purpose. I started waking up 10 minutes earlier than I needed to. Not for productivity, just to sit in the kitchen with coffee while the house was still. The refrigerator would hum, the heat would click on, Biscuit would wander in and settle near my feet like he was clocking in for work. On the counter, I kept a small stack of papers that actually mattered now: school forms, soccer schedules, a list of emergency contacts, a calendar printed and taped inside a cabinet door because it was faster than checking my phone when the morning got loud. Some nights, after the kids fell asleep, I would wipe the kitchen counters slowly and load the dishwasher. It sounds small, but it felt like control in the best way. Not control over a person, control over the space I was responsible for. Paige and I stayed civil. That was the only goal. We used short messages, pickup times, medication reminders. Emma has a spelling test. Noah needs sneakers for gym. Nothing else. There were moments when she tried to drift into other territory, a late-night text that started with, "I've been thinking," or a pause at the end of a handoff where her eyes suggested she wanted a longer conversation. I didn't take the invitation. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because blurred boundaries were how we got hurt in the first place. Clear boundaries were how the kids stayed steady. One evening, Emma asked me a question while I was cutting strawberries at the counter. "Are you sad, Dad?" I kept the knife still and thought for a second. "I'm not the way I was at the beginning," I said. "I'm okay." She watched me like she was checking my face for proof. "Are you mad at Mom?" I shook my head. "I'm not mad, I'm just not confused anymore." That seemed to satisfy her more than any dramatic reassurance ever could. She nodded once and went back to her coloring book. Noah had his own way of processing it. He became very interested in rules. He asked who slept where. He asked which days were mom days and which days were home days. He wanted the schedule repeated the same way every time. So I did. I said it calmly. I kept it consistent. He relaxed when he knew what was next. In quieter moments when I was alone, I thought about the version of myself that used to ignore small discomforts because life was busy. I thought about how easy it is to accept a vague explanation when you are tired. How quickly late meeting becomes a normal phrase. How denial can look like patience. How trust can quietly turn into laziness if you stop paying attention to reality. That's what the file on my laptop really was. Not revenge. A return to reality. I didn't keep the evidence on my desk anymore. I didn't need to see it, but I didn't delete it either. I stored it where I store important things, not out of anger, but out of respect for the truth. It happened. It shaped decisions. It doesn't get rewritten. A month later, a guy from work asked me to grab coffee after a meeting. We sat in the break area with the kind of quiet that happens between people who don't want to make a big deal out of personal things. He stared at his cup for a while and then said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. He lowered his voice. "Did you ever just know something was off but couldn't prove it without feeling crazy?" I didn't ask for names. I didn't push. I just said, "Yes." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. We didn't talk long. I didn't give him a speech. I just told him what helped me. "Stay calm," I said. "Don't accuse without facts. Protect the kids if there are kids. And if you need help, get someone professional involved early." He nodded slowly, like he was writing it down without a pen. That conversation stayed with me, not because I wanted to become a person who collects other people's problems, but because it reminded me of something simple. A lot of people are walking around in homes that look fine from the outside, and some of them are one honest moment away from seeing their life clearly. That's not a scary thought anymore. It's just a real one. Tonight, as I'm telling you this, the house is quiet again. The kids are asleep upstairs. Biscuit is stretched out on the rug like he owns the place. I rinsed the last dish and set it in the rack. I wiped the counter once, slow, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Then I sat down with a cup of tea and listened to the soft sounds of a normal home. Not perfect, not untouched, just steady. If you made it to the end with me, thank you. If this kind of calm, real storytelling is your thing, I'd love to have you here. Tap like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now where you are. And stay close because 2 of the most popular stories on this channel are going to play next.